dad unfortunately passed away, diagnosed with cancer, and then he was gone. And that was in the first 6 months of starting the business. Although it was so hard that first year, I mean, it nearly broke me. Talking kind of very openly, I've never suffered until that time from anything like depression, anxiety, anything like that. There was one point in time where I could barely get out of bed. It was all or nothing, It's almost like I had to make it work, because there was obviously the loan that I took out that was on the line, which was quite sizable, obviously the mortgage to pay, and zero revenue. You can't even just start with a few clients, you can't take clients over from your previous firm. So it's a case of literally zero income, and it takes a long time for the fees you earn off investments to come in. The one rule that sticks out and applies to everyone, any level of wealth, is it's all about living within your means. It's so boring, and I think you can do that at any level. There may be some people who obviously are really struggling. They might be struggling to pay rent, bills, and that sort of thing, but although it sounds kind of almost like a very tough thing to say, you've got to really look at your life seriously and where that money's going, and make sure you're kind of living a lifestyle, or the expenditure is well below as much as possible what you're obviously bringing in. There's these financial influencers that are popping up now, people who are promoting trading systems.
They will sell you a course.
Yeah, they will 100% sell you a course and promise some kind of quick wins with money, but the majority are scams of people who are really uninformed. You never see someone, or I've not come across someone yet, who's chartered as in what I do, who's highly successful, on paper, that they will without a doubt be giving high quality advice, who's putting stuff out there.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy.
And on this episode, I am blessed to be joined by the one and only Dan Thompson. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're most welcome. Good to be here.
So Dan, you have been running a very successful business in the UK, and you've just launched in Dubai as well. How is that treating you?
It's been good. It's been a busy year, to say the least, but it's exciting. There's a lot of change within the business at the minute, especially kind of exploring the Middle East market, the cultural differences. It's had its challenges, as you can expect, but we seem to be getting a bit of traction now. So, it's exciting times, early doors.
And was it anything to do with sort of macro environment in the UK that made you guys think about going to the Middle East, or what was the driver behind that move?
Yeah, I think, it was mixed. I think it was a long time coming. We've had clients in the Middle East for some time now, and it always looked like a promising market. It's the expansion plans that Dubai have, for their population. I think they want to double it by 2030 or something crazy like that. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, but there is change in the UK. I think it is getting tougher to provide advice, my industry here. So I think from a risk management point of view, almost, there was some sort of driver there. It wouldn't, without a doubt, it's not the kind of main reason for kind of expanding over there, but it definitely was a factor, some of the changes in this market. But I think that's probably one of many.
I understand. And when you say it's tougher to give advice in the UK now, what do you mean by that, and what have you seen change, and does it get better?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of red tape, in terms of, there always has been from a compliance point of view. And what I find really challenging, especially because we specialise in dealing with a lot of business owners, directors, C-suite, is I feel like that my clientele specifically, they want the real talk, they want kind of an honest view of what they should be doing. And I think what's really difficult now, I suppose it's the same in a lot of industries, you have to be really careful what you say, right? And for compliance reasons, even on this podcast, you have to be a bit careful, because there's someone somewhere that is worried about the risk, that something is explained in the wrong context or put across in the wrong way, and that's especially true when you're managing people's money, right? So it makes it challenging, because if I was kind of giving you advice, for example, I would want to tell you what I do for myself, be really direct, and just give you kind of almost like the real life version. But you have to kind of balance that with what you need to be saying from a compliance perspective, because there's other stakeholders involved, right? I think the legislation, although it's still not as it's still good, but not as developed as the UK and Dubai. I think you've got a bit more flexibility with obviously the way you can handle clients, but that has also been abused in the past by firms over there, which is one of the reasons we're there as well. To kind of raise the standard of advice that's in the UAE.
So do you feel sometimes in the UK that actually the legislation means you can't give the best advice if you're having to change it to be compliant in that way?
Yeah, I 100% think that. I'll probably get shot for saying that, but I think it needs to be looked at. There's changes that have been brought in even recently, and it's hard for, I think, some people to understand that from being on the outside of the industry, what you have to do to give the correct advice, to look after clients and service them appropriately, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult. And a consequence of that is there's a lot of there's a massive advice gap. There's a lot of people who can't receive financial advice because it's just not profitable for the firms. So there's this gap where there's people who probably need financial advice the most who don't receive it because it's just too time-consuming, laborious for a firm to be able to provide the advice.
It's interesting. And is that one of the reasons why? Because actually, the first time I came across you was probably like a viral bit of content that you did on Instagram, talking about, you know, making, or I think it was like an analogy for, was it potentially a football analogy?
Yeah, it was a football analogy.
Football analogy for like diversification of assets, if I remember correctly.
Spot on.
And is that part of what you want to do then? Make that type of understanding more accessible, because there are so many people who, you know, fall at that advice gap.
100%. I think I've got to a point in my career now where you start to kind of question why you're doing things and what value you're adding. And there's the kind of value add to clients, but then they're paying for that, right? And there's that trade-off. But then there's what value you can give back to, I suppose, the wider community. And it's hard when you know there's a lot you can offer and you just haven't got the resources to get around everyone. So starting to kind of do some work like this, you know, get on podcasts, speak to people, get kind of free educational content out there is an absolute priority now, because people just don't get it. There's just not enough of it. And the content that's out there, funny enough, is from people who aren't qualified. You know, there's these financial influencers that are popping up now, or people who are promoting trading
But
systems.
they will sell you a course.
Yeah, they will 100% sell you a course and promise some kind of quick wins with them with money. But the majority are scams or people who are really uninformed. You never see someone, or I've not come across someone yet, who's chartered as in what I do, who's highly successful, you know, on paper, you know, that they will without a doubt be given high quality advice, who's putting stuff out there. The difficulty I think that you have in my industry is there's a lot of red tape to post on social media to do these things, and you have to almost go against the grain a bit and just put stuff out there and see what happens. I mean, even under the umbrella I work under, you know, there's a lot of restrictions and there's a lot of back and forth between me and that umbrella, you know, because of obviously doing this sort of work.
Yeah, it must be frustrating being someone who's very entrepreneurial and then operating in an environment where you can't take risks, right? Or you have to be very, very considered in the risk that you take, right?
100%. I mean, it's been a constant battle for me my entire career, because I've always been entrepreneurial and had ideas and about how to kind of implement stuff, and I've picked the worst industry almost to be entrepreneurial in. But then it's a challenge, right? You know, there's a lot of people who aren't doing these sort of things or should be doing them, and it's finding a kind of solution to this and getting that out there. But it seems to be getting traction.
But it's really interesting, because I feel like there's a big secret in any regulated industry, which is almost like tolerated risk by people who want to do something very, very innovative in that space, that, okay, we're going to make enough money so that when the fine comes, because we get found out about what we're doing, we can pay off. Binance, most recently, the founder, just $4 billion fine?
Yeah.
It's a pretty big fine.
Eye-watering.
Something eye-watering, and they knew what they were doing. They were like, fuck AML, fuck everything else. Let's just go. Let's just go. And by the time they catch us, we'll have taken so much market share, we'll just eat the fine, right? Yeah. So I guess it's an interesting one. Sometimes those claiming the most regulation tend to be the ones breaking it, right?
I think it's almost like that saying it reminds me of it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. And I think sometimes that's so true. And I wish I'd kind of, I suppose, latched onto that earlier on, you know, and as you kind of progress, I think now with some of the risks I take, I have to weigh up, you know, it's just like with business, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen if I put this out here? What's a shame is the more I think successful you get, you have more weight. So if something does happen, you know, you're less likely to be told off. It'll be tolerated a bit more because they know you know what you're doing and you're not doing anything stupid. I think early doors in my career, you know, you'd have compliance on the door straight away and they'd risk probably booting you out if you said the wrong thing.
Oh, really?
So, so I think it's like anything, you know, you gain kind of some momentum in a career, become quite successful, you know, you have a following, have credibility. It's very hard then to kind of shoot someone down if they're genuinely doing the right thing and trying to help people. Yeah,
100%, especially if you're like open to having conversations with them where they're like, well, you shouldn't be doing this. It's like, oh, didn't realise necessarily, well, go back and forth on these things, work on it together. Yeah, but you're right. I think if the intention is pure and people can see that actually you're trying to do something good, sometimes legislation is just outdated, doesn't work anymore.
Oh, my industry is massive,
right?
massive.
Yeah.
In finance is so outdated. My industry, I mean, even technology, for example. I mean, you'd find it interesting, some of the processes and systems that are still in place. It's really far behind most of our industries.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned before, which I think is really interesting, talking about education to the people who need it most. One of the things that I think is crazy about the UK is if I want to put my entire month's wages into a fixed odds betting machine, I can do that.
Yeah.
Nothing stopping me doing that. If I want to invest in a startup, I'm not allowed unless I am a sophisticated or self-accredited high net worth. That doesn't feel fair, right?
It's bonkers. There'll be betting shops everywhere, and there's very little restrictions of what people can do to their finances. But if I try and get an investor's money into a startup or even something like an EIS scheme, venture capital trust, anything like that, the loopholes I'd have to go to. Firstly, that'd have to be, like you said, defined as a sophisticated investor or highly experienced at least. Then they would have to have a certain level of assets to almost show they can lose the money and still be okay, So it's almost like if I had a client who had pensions, investments, brokerage account with us, private banking, only then, and if there was substantial assets in those solutions, only then may we be able to drop a bit in an EIS.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Imagine if Bet365 had to prove that their clients could afford to lose that money.
Yeah.
And watch how quickly they'd be out of business.
There's something terribly wrong there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, on the note of free education,
yeah.
For anyone listening to this, within what you're allowed to do from a compliance perspective, cost of living crisis, things are tough right now for many, many people in the UK and beyond. If you're someone who's trying to change your situation in life, think about the future, think about social mobility, where are you starting?
That is a really good question and a difficult one. I think the reason it's a little bit challenging is because when people's circumstances are so different, the advice I give one person is so different to the next. But generally speaking, I think the one rule that sticks out and applies to everyone, and it does apply nearly to any level of wealth, is it's all about living within your means. It's so boring, right? And I think you can do that at any level. So there may be some people who obviously are really struggling. They might be struggling to pay rent, bills, and that sort of thing. But although it sounds kind of almost like a very tough thing to say, you've got to really look at your life seriously and where that money's going, and make sure you're kind of living a lifestyle, or the expenditure is well below as much as possible what you're obviously bringing in, and then start to try and pack that away. And I think there's no one I've really met that can't do that. I think initially they think they can't, and it does take a bit of time. If you earn a greater salary, it's obviously a bit easier to pack money away, start building up assets, and improve, the social mobility piece. But if you are on a lower wage, it might take a bit longer. But that's where a lot of people start. That's where I started. So it's a slow start. Building wealth or getting out of any situation that's tough. It's difficult, but it does compound like the compounding of money happens. In an investment account, it's really no different.
That's amazing advice. And from your own perspective and your journey, I'd love to learn more about that, because you're now with 4 billion assets under management.
Yeah.
So where did you start?
So it depends how far you want to go back, but I got into the industry straight out of university, even though I didn't think it was necessarily what I was going to end up doing. I was always quite entrepreneurial, set up little businesses when I was 16, and the days of eBay.
Yeah, nice.
There's little things I did back then. Then started, I suppose, as a general financial advisor, worked my way up, then got more involved in the technical side of advice, so became a stockbroker, sat on investment committee meetings. I kind of did what I think a lot of people would have done in their entire career in my 20s. So then I got into my 30s, decided to set up on my own. I set up the business which I have today, which is Sovereign. In that process, I partnered up with a guy who's already highly successful, 10 years ahead of me, and we essentially pooled resources to have the firm we have today. Admittedly, he has a lot more of the assets than what I do. He's 10 years ahead, and he's a highly successful guy in his own right.
Yeah, of course. But it must be an amazing feeling to be able to say 4 billion AUM, and I imagine that's something. Well, is it something you could have imagined when you first started? Was the aspiration, ambition always there? Or is this now like 4 billion? Is like, this is nowhere versus where I need to be?
No, it's crazy. The goalposts just keep moving. I know, I'm sure you can resonate with that, and most clients of ours, I see the same pattern. And don't get me wrong, kind of, I do regularly kind of step back and think, God, I can't believe how far I've come and what's happened. But I definitely think I'm in disbelief, because your average firm in the UK might in 20 years or so build kind of 10, 20, 30 million. I see acquisitions going along all the time where people have built up, say, 20, 30 million in assets, in their town or whatnot in the UK. And that's a lifetime of work for your average, say, advisor who's maybe on his own, small team. To kind of start getting up to those sort of figures is eye-watering. But admittedly, like I said, Charles, who's my partner, he built the bulk of that. And then I came in the last 5 years, and still we've in our Midlands office alone are up to about 100 million. So
nice. Again,
it's something that I thought would take my lifetime. I think from here to get to 1 billion in our specific office will probably be 5-10 years from now, and that would be an incredible feat. There's not many firms in the UK that look after that amount of assets.
Amazing. And I see, obviously, you're super active on social. Got an amazing Instagram following, doing really cool stuff on LinkedIn. When did that become part of your strategy? Has that been something which has brought in lots of new clients? Just talk to us about that, because it's not, when you think wealth manager, it doesn't scream social media immediately,
Instagram,
right?
does it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting story, and it'll probably make you laugh actually a little bit. So when I was in a previous role, the stockbroking role, I used to do a bit of online influencing, like everybody did, and it was mainly in fitness. I've trained my whole life, and I started putting kind of diet plans up and my workouts, and this was way before the wave of fitness influencers. This was probably nearly 10 years ago.
Wow, okay.
So
ahead of your time.
Yeah, I without a doubt. And I remember at the time, I built up the following to like 300,000, and that was the equivalent to what would be probably a couple million today. So that was going really well, and obviously I got a lot of traction, really enjoyed it, and then I set up a clothing brand, like every young lad seems to have done over the last 5 years. So again, I used the skills that I built up on the influencing side to build the clothing brand, and I did that for 3-4 years. We sold it. I think that the reason I kind of sold out of that business on reflection now is I could never give it my all. The investment career was kind of just, it was almost just rocketing.
Yeah.
And then I knew I was going to be setting up my own firm. So it was around the time I set up the wealth management firm that I sold the other firm. Thought I need to put all my focus into this. So my background has always been, I suppose, on social media to a degree. I've always been involved in marketing, and we ran our own kind of Facebook ads. So I got kind of experience with stuff like that. So it kind of transitioned over to that. So when I set up the investment firm, I was like, right, I'm going to transfer these skills over. I'm going to see if I can really get out there, meet the sort of clientele I need to be meeting. And then really, it's only in the last couple of years where I've used it to give back. It isn't, I've not really been putting the content out there to acquire new clients, because really most of the people who see my content wouldn't qualify for us to actually give them advice. It'd be more just pointing them in the right direction. So now it's more about getting giving back, helping people, putting the free advice out there like we talked about earlier, and I suppose improving, I suppose from a very kind of selfish point of view, improving credibility and reputation. It's nice to kind of build that over time, and even our existing clients, they start to follow it and they kind of enjoy the content. Like, that's my wealth manager.
Nice. No, I love that, and I genuinely think like it's all about, if you do have a platform, using it, and of course it's going to benefit you, but using it in a way to help as many other people as possible, right? And I think that's where I see people grow and be successful, is where genuinely they realize that the position they're in means that they can help others, and I think that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and it's gone down so well. The feedback I've had from putting stuff out there has really helped. And we've had inquiries come in, and they might not be suitable for us as clients because it wouldn't be cost effective for them. It's on both sides, but we've managed to kind of refer them to someone they should be speaking to, or just a nudge in the right direction. So it's definitely having the kind of intended outcome I wanted from the start, if not better.
Yeah, nice. And would you ever go down the personal finance route away from wealth management? There's a lot on that at the moment. Massive, again, cost of living crisis right now, it's a huge area. Or are you not allowed to because of what you do on there?
You can. It's just with its challenges. So there's a lot of kind of personal finance gurus out there who are obviously incredibly popular, and I don't always agree with some of the content that's put out there, because they're not necessarily. Sometimes they're not even qualified to give advice.
Some shots? No,
Yeah, it's just
name and shame.
Yeah, well, there's a few individuals, but I think they probably do more good than bad. It's just not all their content is, in my opinion, particularly useful, because what I think they do is they might help someone save kind of a bit by switching between savings accounts, but what they really need to be doing is something a hell of a lot more drastic, so I remember some clients came to me once and they're like, my neighbour has told me that if I move my cash savings to, I don't know, Bank B, that I'm going to save like this 50 quid or I'll get a slightly better rate on my cash ISA by 0.5%. What they really needed to do is they had too much money in cash. Inflation's absolutely smashing their money and they need to get it invested. And that's really going to make a dent in terms of helping them get in a better financial position. Yeah. But saving kind of 200 quid a year on their savings is okay, it's better than nothing, but
it's not really going to do much.
Yeah, it's not going to do as much.
Especially 200 quid's about half a week's of shopping at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's probably a loaf of bread in London.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. I've got 5 questions that I ask every guest. My first question for you is, what is the single biggest risk you've ever taken, and what was the outcome?
Right. Single biggest risk I've ever taken. It is probably leaving my last employer and setting up the investment firm, without a doubt. I think because what was at stake at the time and because of what was going on at the time. So the short of it is, I was on a 6-figure salary, being offered an equity position in the firm, so it was really attractive, very comfortable at that point in time, just hitting 30, so I'm getting into my stride, in my career. I just bought my first house. I'd waited and kind of saved a deposit, so I had quite a big mortgage over my head, and then for various reasons, I need to do this on my own, and it's not like setting up a bakery, setting up a wealth management firm. It's hard.
Although you're helping people make bread, so there you go.
Yeah, I love that. So, it's a challenge, and I think the problem you got in my industry when you're younger is people perceive you as having less experience, which you of course do to some degree. So you're trying to convince someone to part with £500,000, £1 million of their money and invest it with you at 30 years old is not that easy unless you've got an incredible reputation. The same with your professional connections that you work with, like solicitors, accountants who will kind of work alongside you, probably refer their clients, very hard. So taking that leap of faith was incredibly difficult, huge risk. I took out a significant amount of debt to get an office from day one, because you cannot take £1 million clients to your house or vice versa. You don't really want to, yeah. And even if you go to, I'm sure they'll be happy for you to go around to their house like some advisors do, but you don't do that with your solicitor, your accountant. You take it seriously, you go to their offices, and that's how I've always operated. So all my clients come to me. So to get the office from day one and do all that, it put a lot of financial pressure on myself and my partner at the time.
Wow, that is a big risk.
Yeah, it was all or nothing. It's almost like I had to make it work, because there was obviously the loan that I took out that was on the line, which was quite sizable. Obviously the mortgage to pay and zero revenue. Because you can't even just start with a few clients. You can't take clients over from your previous firm. Right. So it's a case of literally zero income, and it takes a long time for the fees you earn off investments to come in. Because they tend to be ongoing and they're delayed. So yeah, it was an incredibly tough year, and then a few other things happened, which made it really challenging. My dad unfortunately passed away in the space of a few months. He was diagnosed with cancer, and then he was gone, and that was in the first 6 months of starting the business. So it was absolute carnage. But yeah, without a doubt, the biggest risk I've taken.
Wow, that's incredible, man. And how long after taking that risk were you like, okay, this was worth it, this paid off, this was the right decision?
I think even though it was so hard that first year, it nearly broke me. Talking kind of very openly, I've never suffered until that time from anything like depression, anxiety, anything like that. And there was one point in time where I could barely get out of bed, and my partner at the time, who now works in the firm, but she didn't at the time, she'd leave for work, and I was in tears, I felt like I was in over my head. So although there was moments like that, there was also moments where I felt I had a lot of freedom. I was like, I've done this, okay, we need to get some revenue in ASAP. But there was a sense of freedom. So I think I started having that in the first 6 months. Within a year, the loans had been paid off. We had enough revenue coming in to pay the bills, and we were in the clear. So I made a lot more progress. I think any founder or startup, well, not necessarily all of them, but I think you'll be surprised sometimes of what you can do when you have that amount of pressure and that amount of risk on the line.
100%, 100%. And I really think it taps into the hunter-gatherer thing, right? When you're in those stakes, when it's literally, I kill, we eat. I don't, we starve.
Yeah.
And it's literally as stark as that.
Yeah, it's incredible motivation.
Yeah, it really is. But incredible to hear that you came through, and we've all been through those horrible, tough moments as founders, entrepreneurs, and other walks of life as well. But it's the most rewarding thing, right? When being able to sit here and look back and be like, look how far we've come. Yeah,
it's incredible. I mean, I would do it all over again. I really would, because although there's so many highs and lows, especially in that first year, the feeling you've got when you've built something, yourself, and that kind of, I suppose it's like the fear that drives you. It's a huge amount of motivation, and you kind of dig deeper than probably you realise you could to achieve the outcome you've got. So yeah.
100%.
Unreal.
Thank you for sharing that, man. Okay, my next question for you is there anything you wish you did differently?
That's a really hard one, because I try and live with no regrets, right? So I think everything I do, I will look back and think, right, I've learned something from that, or try to learn from it. The first thing that probably springs to mind is I always wish and it's not necessarily doing something differently, it's me probably acting differently or adopting a different behaviour, is I wish I'd been more confident and trusted my gut earlier on, and I suppose to some degree was afraid to take bigger risks. I mean, I think they were a lot bigger than probably most people do. But one thing I've learned, especially in the last kind of 5-10 years, is it's better to go big. And you think, if this doesn't work out, your world's going to end. And it's not. 9 times out of 10, the worst scenario isn't really that bad. I always remember someone saying to me, the worst thing that can happen really is you die or you go prison, right?
Yeah,
in most cases. And in most things you do in life, you're not going to put yourself in a position normally where either of those are going to happen, right? So it's weird, because I remember that now, and I think, you can, if you've got it in you, you've got that fire in you, that grit, even if you go kind of big and you lose everything or really kind of balls it up, you will recover. So I think it's a different, I wish I had the mentality I haven't had now, probably earlier. And then I probably would have done things a bit differently as well.
Yeah, makes total sense. What are you proudest of?
That is a really tough one. What am I most proudest of? I don't want to be cliche and say the business, because I am obviously really proud of it. I think that what I'm proudest of is one of my main drivers behind everything I do is to provide a better life for my family. And the first person that comes to mind is my mum. She did so much for me and my sister when we were growing up. Like, Dad was about, but not as much, so to speak. And she gave up everything. There's so many memories I can think back on, where even when I was, a kid, I remember thinking, like, I need to pay her back one day for all this, which is so odd, when you're a young child, I suppose, to a degree. And now I'm finding the position where I can start doing stuff to help her. And it's weird to see kind of that change, where someone's looked after you their whole life and been there for you, and you can kind of, I suppose, start trying to give them a much better life. So I had a lovely experience this year where while I was out in Dubai, I got mum over, and we spent kind of like 4 days together and just spent loads of time with her. She saw things she'd never seen before, and it was one of the best things I've probably done in my life. As cheesy as it sounds, absolutely loved it.
No, amazing. She must be super proud, and that's what it's all about, right? Being able to give back.
Yeah, 100%. And then getting all the family together now, kind of everyone's settling down, having children, that sort of thing. So my sister's got a little one. Yeah. We're in that age zone now where we're either there's little ones coming along, or people are getting married or whatnot. So yeah, it's nice, because when we get all the family together now, we're in a place where we kind of have opportunities and things we didn't have growing up. So yeah. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Okay, my second to last one for you is, what does it take to be successful?
That's a really good question again. So the first thing that comes to mind, the thing I always kind of latch onto, even when I'm interviewing, is I think it's all about grit. Like, there's I don't know if it's I can't remember her name now, maybe Angela Duckworth. There's a book specifically written about a psychologist who talks about this term grit, and I think they define it as being resilient, having perseverance, and I think that's huge. As a business owner or anyone successful in their career, I think you've got to have that. You've got to, there's that saying where it's how many punches you can take and keep getting back up. And that's what I feel like it is. It's like it being in business sometimes. You know, you think something great happens and then you start getting a few punches and absorbing a few more, and loads of things start falling apart, and you get through that, and then more things happen. And having that resilience, you know, to keep going, I think it is one of the biggest traits you need to be successful.
Yeah, perfectly put. All right, my last one for you is 15-year-old Dan walks in the room right now. What are you going to tell him?
Change his haircut. I don't know. I'd probably tell him what I just said then.
Yeah.
I'd probably say trust your own kind of opinion a lot more, block out everyone else's, kind of keep headstrong and just go for it, you know, because I wish, again, when I was younger, you know, I was a little bit more confident in my own decision making and probably took on other people's opinions a little bit too much. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, triangulating and listening to other people's advice is so important to make a more informed decision or opinion, and I do that, you know, with mentors all the time. But then trusting your own decision making and having confidence and committing to that decision is so important. So probably something like that.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, and I think you're so right on the, you know, there's listening to advice when it's about like information, experience, those things, but there's also the worrying about what people think, right? There's the ego side of that, and that's the bit you got to get rid of, right? I think so many of us, I think everyone, until you hit a certain age of maturity, self-awareness, whatever it is, we spend so much of the early part of our lives based around what other people think of us, you know, and it's so restrictive, right?
Yeah.
But it's something amazing when you break out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's age is a big thing as well, right? I think in your 20s you worry more about what other people think. You kind of, I think, start bridging into your 30s, and then you realise really no one even really thinks about what you're doing in the first place, you know, which is quite funny. So it's nice, you know, getting that change in mentality. Yeah,
100%. I was saying this to someone last night. I feel so liberated. I'm 32 years old.
Yeah.
And it is just that. It's like that, oh wait, no one actually cares about anything other than themselves. Like, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. I feel so blessed that, you know, I didn't sort of settle down in my 20s and think that how my mindset was in the 20s was what my mindset was going to be. You know, my world view of the 20s that mattered to me in my 20s. So, I was so scared of turning 30.
Yeah, I didn't take it well. Like, I really didn't. I think one thing that I've always struggled with is, you know, like the societal rules. You know, like you should do this, settle down. This is how it should be done, and I never kind of fit into that mold. So it's nice, isn't it? I mean, the word you use, liberating. I think when that point kind of comes where you just really don't care as much anymore, and you trust your own judgment, and you know if you're doing things right, you know, and so forth. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Love it. Dan, where can people find you?
In the Midlands, in my office most days, but no, Instagram, so which is Dan Tomo, and on LinkedIn, Dan Thompson. You know, there's probably not that many on there, but yeah.
Amazing. Dan, you're a legend. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching the episode. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe below so that you can support the podcast and we can keep on bringing you amazing new guests. If you want to see the other amazing episodes in this podcast, click into our series section. As ever, if there are any other guests or topics you want us to explore, just let me know in the comments and we'll do our best to bring someone in.